Ladies and gentlemen, start your notepads. We're about to begin. Hey everybody, Mark Emery here. Very glad to see you. All right. Well, first of all, I am truly honored that you are here with me today. I know your time is limited, just as everyone's seems to be these days. And it's with great gratitude that I have to know that you're able to take the time, or willing to take the time, to be here with me at this moment. It tells me one thing. It tells me that I'm dealing with serious people. There's so many ways that we have to spend our time, and it shows me that you're serious. We're here to accomplish things. We're doing things that you don't see other people being able to do or achieve. And so the fact that you're here making the commitment in time to advance in your knowledge and capability tells me that you're the kind of people that I want to hang around with. Productive-minded, committed, serious, and we have the same values, many of the same values, I think. And there's nothing that says we can't have a little bit of fun or a lot of fun doing it, right? So people often ask me when I travel, they go, Mark, you going for business or pleasure? And it's always both. If the primary purpose is business, I make sure I have some fun along the way, and of course vice versa. If I'm on a cruise, just sitting on the top deck, enjoying myself, I'll make sure I'm out networking, trying to meet interesting people. For one reason or another. It's not always for business, but it often can be, and can be very fruitful. So I'm happy that you're here, and I'm happy to be associated with you in that respect. This is really the nexus of all of my activities. That is that we can learn from each other. You're here to learn from me right now, and certainly you've got life experience and knowledge that I can learn from you. So as we develop our relationship, I look at it really as a collaboration, where we have the free flow of information, and together we can all advance that much quicker. All right, that's the whole idea behind virtually everything that I do, and I hope you share that. I think you probably do. All right, so now let me just say that we are in webinar mode as opposed to web conference, which means we are not interactive. I often have trouble in the interactive mode with people controlling their mute buttons, background noise, distractions, and the like. So I want to get through this presentation as quickly as possible without distractions. However, we are interactive from the standpoint that you'll be able to enter your questions and comments in the chat box, which you'll see in the lower left, I believe it is. Okay? So use the chat box. We'll use that for questions. And if I don't address your questions immediately on the spot, I'll definitely try to get to those in the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation. All right, so let me go right to screen sharing and get into the slideshow that we have for you, and we'll get right into the heart of the subject matter here tonight. All right, so here we go. I will now move straight into the slideshow we have prepared for you. So here we are. We're going to talk about privacy and the freedom to prosper. It's a very interesting grouping of terms, I think, because without privacy, prosperity cannot exist long term. And I've had some thoughts here just in the last few days. We see what's going on in the news, right? How all the sealed indictments are coming out for all the crooks and criminals as the president is trying to drain the swamp. And I was thinking about this, and I presume you're well aware that 9/11 was a complete setup job. The official story is completely fake, and the whole thing was staged. Just like Pearl Harbor was, it was allowed to happen for political reasons. Those political reasons were to set up the surveillance state, right? The Patriot Act. We all, have heard plenty about the Patriot Act. That never would have come about if it weren't for 9/11, right? Now, isn't it a delicious thought to think that that very same surveillance state, where nothing is secret, nothing, absolutely nothing, especially if it's online or in computers, but isn't it a delicious thought to recognize that that very same surveillance state has been used against the very people who implemented it against us? Just something to think about as you put your head on the pillow tonight, maybe to help you sleep a little bit better. Okay, so that I thought was quite interesting. But putting politics aside, we have to have privacy for any kind of long-term prosperity to exist, right? So let me just tell you who this presentation is going to be for, all right? Just so right off the bat you can see if this is going to be for you or not. Basically, we're talking about productive business owners, professionals, consultants who have a cash flow and a net worth which merits preservation, okay? What we're going to talk about here today is for people who are awake, alert, they're well-informed people, and they can think out of the box. People who are stuck in the traditional status quo public school education system probably are not going to relate to this very well. And I know that's none of you, right? So we're talking to anyone who's responsible for a home, a business, a family, and a future, who is seeking a breakthrough to get off of that corporate treadmill and start living on another level. Privacy is necessary to achieve prosperity again, okay? We're talking to people who are fed up and they've had enough, all right? You know you can do better under the right circumstances, all right? So if you find yourself in one of these categories, then what we're going to be talking about is geared specifically for you. If not, if you're not in one of these categories, don't worry. We have other resources that will help you perhaps get to the level you need to be, where these solutions will be more applicable and beneficial for you. And certainly if you're an affiliate of the Law Club, then you'll want to know about this program and put this into your quiver of an arsenal to bring it out to the public to help you get to the next level, okay? So in the next 60 minutes, I'm going to break down and expose the barriers to achieving some of these things, all right? We're going to discover what it takes to operate in near complete anonymity, what it takes to build wealth free from theft, and you know who I'm talking about here. We'll talk about what it takes to immunize yourself and your assets from attack from predators, and eliminate most forms of personal debt. Wouldn't that be nice? All right, we're going to talk about creating new streams of private cash flow, either on a passive or an active basis, if that is something that fits into your plan. All right? So I'm going to be teaching you what I learned. Have I learned all this from a book I found on Amazon? Of course not. You know, I can speak with authority on these subjects because I've accomplished all of them personally, and I've got firsthand experience. All right? So that's important to know. Been there and done that. And people often want to know, well, you know, where's the proof? You know, who can you bring forward that can, you know, testify to these things? Well, you're getting it right from the horse's mouth, you know, with over 20 years of experience. All right. So we're going to build a new future for you, hopefully, and help you to be true to who you really are, which means you won't have to sell yourself out to your boss, to the company, to other people with other objectives and other values that you don't necessarily share. And really, there's no worse feeling than that, knowing that you're doing something that you really don't believe in, that your heart is really not into it. And of course, in such a condition, you simply don't do as well as you would otherwise, right? Okay, so here's my promise to you in this presentation, all right? I'm going to put you on a path to personal breakthrough, all right? Now, that doesn't mean we're going to accomplish everything here in the next 60 minutes, but we'll put you on a path. You can see the path. You'll have a vision of what's ahead and the journey that needs to be taken, all right? And build a completely new future for you and your family. I want you to see yourself living stress-free in freedom and abundance and feel like you're only one step away from heaven. Now, I know that sounds a little bit esoteric, perhaps a little bit out there, but like I just got through saying, you know, I'm talking about things from a firsthand experience. And every day, based on how I live, where I live, the conditions that I live in, legally, financially, physically, and otherwise, I feel like I'm only one step away from heaven. Some of you have seen photos of where I live, and I'm often above the clouds, looking down on the clouds below me. Now, if that isn't feeling like you're one step away from heaven, I don't know what is. So I'm serious when I tell you this, okay? Don't just brush it off as you know, some kind of esoteric you know, philosophy talk. All right, so that's what I want to accomplish here tonight with you. All right, so we're going to cover a lot of ground, and I want you to stick with me. Okay, stick with me to the end of the presentation, because I'm going to have a couple of important bonuses for you, which you'll get at the end of the presentation. All right, this way you've already committed the time. Don't bail out unless an ambulance is needed, and it'll be worth your while. I'll guarantee it. Okay, so let's dive in. Let me start out asking you a few questions. All right, if you're a business owner, and everybody's running their own personal business, right? You got income, you got expenses, you're managing that. You're a business owner, taking care of your business. How much profit is left over in your business after you get done paying everybody else? And I'm talking, you know, employees, insurance companies, lawyers, accountants, permits, taxes, FICA, FUTA, advertising. All right, how much is left over for you when everybody else gets their cut first? Is that going to be enough to take care of daily life and comforts for both today and tomorrow? Okay, unfortunately, the way things are structured in our economy and financial system, we're all pretty much running on a razor's edge, aren't we? Running on the corporate treadmill and basically sitting on the razor's edge, financially speaking. And that's not where we need to be. Razors are sharp. It's not fun to sit on them. Now, that's metaphorical. All right. So we got to think about that. How much is invested in your business infrastructure? I'm talking about legal structure, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, real estate, advertising, inventory, business development, intellectual property, things like that. See if you can come up with just kind of a rough figure. What would that be for you? All right. And so with that in mind, if that's set up in a single business entity, are you prepared to possibly lose it all due to a single event? You know, most business owners have all their eggs in one basket. One company, one corporation. And the way things are these days, with all the risks and challenges that we have to face as business owners, that basket is in high-risk territory. You know, conventional wisdom says, well, you set up a corporation, you buy a building with it, you set up your restaurant, buy your equipment, signage, run your operations and banking through that. And what you got is a nice ripe plum hanging on a low-hanging branch for someone to come along and pick off whenever they like. Okay? These are the things that we need to think about. Have you ever thought about how to use tax-free trusts to compartmentalize your assets and seal them off with firewalls. Okay? Using the example I just made reference to, instead of having your restaurant in one entity, what if you had the real estate in one entity? You had the employees working for an employee leasing company as a second entity. That company leases employees to a third entity, which is an operating entity. And the fourth entity is the banking and finance entity, with a fifth perhaps taking care of inventory, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So now when someone comes along, wants to pick that nice ripe plum off of that low branch, who do they sue? They sue who they see, which is the operating company, which really doesn't own anything other than some management ideas. Okay, so you get the idea what we're talking about here. It's just common sense, right? Just common sense. It just needs to be done in the proper way. So that's just trying to convey one idea along those lines as it relates to business structuring. Okay, let me tell you a story about Paul. Paul was a client of mine, and he was running a very successful small package delivery business in Denver, Colorado. Very successful. It was new. It was maybe 3 or 4 years old. He had done very well. He was able to use profits from his operation to buy his dream home, and just beautiful. And he was just, living the good life, the American dream as a business owner. Well, one day a state regulator came in and wanted to start asking some questions, poking around, looking through some books and records, specifically his workman's compensation. Now, he was rated in his workman's compensation premiums in a category that handles, for a small package delivery, that handles packages of 25 pounds or less. Okay? Not too many injuries or accidents happen at that level, right? So he had a very favorable premium for his workman's compensation, or at least something he could live with. Well, long story short, this regulator ended up re-rating him, his business, for handling packages of 100 pounds or less, which he never dealt with. It wasn't his business. It wasn't his clientele. But guess what happened? His workman's compensation premiums skyrocketed. You can imagine how many physical injuries might one expect from some, soy boy trying to pick up a 100-pound package versus a 25-pound package. All right? The difference is exponential. So not only did they unjustly re-rate his workman's compensation premiums to a level he could not afford and wasn't willing to pay, but that wasn't enough. They also assessed him for premiums ex post facto, nunc pro tunc. In other words, going all the way back several years from when he started his business. Pure tyranny. And naturally, he just laughed at that prospect. No way in hell he was going to pay that, nor could he. Problem. He used profits from his business to buy his dream home. Now he's worried about his dream home. He's not thinking about his business. What happened is that we made an arrangement with Paul where he was able to find a friendly company and enter into a contract with that friendly company where he had fiduciary responsibility. That fiduciary responsibility was subject to potential damages to the countersigning party on the agreement if Paul were not handling his duties responsibly. So to cover that risk, the friendly company, since Paul was not able to put up a bond or a cash deposit to bond himself for that risk, the friendly company was able to put a lien on the property. Paul finally said, F you to the state, closed his business, sold his house, The friendly company with the lien showed up at the closing, picked up their check, and they and Paul walked out of the closing, very happy that they had at least saved his home. And he naturally moved out of state. Says, no more of this crap. So, these shakedowns happen. They happen to honest businesses who are not doing anything wrong. This is like the mafia coming in and shaking you down. All right? So we know the tyranny that's out there, ready to come down on us at any given time. But Paul, being a prudent, take charge type of individual, he didn't let it get the best of him. He didn't let it destroy him. All right? It took down his business, but you know what? He now had the experience. He could go start up again somewhere else. And he was able to save his home in the process. So the point here is that if you're going to win in situations like this, you've got to be a take charge type of individual. You've got to be proactive. You've got to think ahead about these things and not wait until a crisis occurs before you start thinking about what to do. And believe me, that's human nature. People don't want to take on extra expense or burden or time or energy, if it's not necessary. So we have to overcome our human nature if we want to avoid these things and be thinking ahead, planning ahead, okay? So that's Paul's story. So I hope that point rests well with you. Then what do you do when Big Brother comes along and says, you owe me money? Most people have no idea what to do other than write out a check, if they're fortunate enough to be able to write a check. If not, what are we looking at? Liens, seizures, garnishments, the possibility of becoming destitute. I don't need to tell you all the horror stories about the IRS, but I'd be really interested to see a comprehensive study as to how many divorces, business failures, bankruptcies, and even suicides have resulted from what these people do. I don't need to tell you about that. All right? We need to be thinking about this ahead of time and position yourself in a way that you're not at risk. We'll talk more about that. So then what do you do when a natural disaster strikes? Again, you're in business. You're dependent upon a local economy, the people in the local area to support your pizza shop or package delivery or mailboxes, etc., or whatever business you're operating. What happens when your neighborhood looks like this? And we're seeing this more and more, aren't we? It seems like. Harvey, Irma, right now we've got the big freeze going on, tornadoes, earthquakes. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. How many tens of thousands or millions of people have been affected by natural disasters? And what happens to your business when one of these comes along? Okay? So the point I'm trying to get across is you need to be thinking about generating cash flow that is not location dependent. Anybody who was in this location when this disaster happened, guess what? They're out of business, aren't they? Okay? So then we have the legal system. I almost hate to bring that up because we could talk a long time about that, couldn't we? All right? Now, what's amazing is that you know as well as I do, if you're paying attention to the news, that everything is being uncovered, isn't it? Secrets from generations ago are coming to the surface. They're being uncovered. And you know that just from watching the news. You know, some of those secrets relate to the bogus legal system. And we can teach you how to be completely immune from bogus charges on statutory violations where there's no victim other than the state. All right, but again, you don't have to do anything wrong to be in a bad situation here. Why? Because the justice system is not about justice. And I think you understand that. It's about business. And if you've got business, if you've got assets, guess what? Someone is going to find a way to get a hook around your leg and drag you into one of these courtrooms and rake you over the coals. That's what they do. All right? We know about the bonds and how they profit from the bonds in the marketplace, and the whole thing is, it's just a broker house, buying and selling securities. And the more times they can get more customers in here, the more securities they can create and get rich off of and stash that money away in the combined annual financial reports, and nobody even knows what's going on, except you. So you got to think about these things. You don't have to do anything wrong to get raked over the coals. Next, what will you do when they knock on your door looking for your registered guns? You think that's far-fetched? If you do, you need to check on what Rahm Emanuel has done in Chicago, refusing the assistance of Americans from the National Guard, but instead trying to negotiate with the United Nations to bring in UN peacekeeping troops to scour the neighborhoods of Chicago to do sweeps for guns under the guise of crime prevention. And that's all it is. It's a guise. What are you going to do when they knock on your door? Or they see one of your posts in Facebook and they come over asking to see some of your most recent tax papers. Okay? And again, I don't need to tell you about Facebook, do I? Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I use it for business purposes more than personal. And I'm well aware of the risks and factor that in accordingly to my activities, all right? But these are things you need to think about. All right, so the big question is, if you could take all of these problems, the risks, the threats, the concerns you have at night, the complications in your life, the limitations on your business, put them all in one big bag, throw that bag over a cliff so you can walk away to a new life of peace and prosperity, would you do it? Sounds like a simple question, doesn't it? But you know what? There's a lot of people that don't or won't. They're comfortable with the status quo. Yeah, it's pain in the neck, but they're afraid. They're afraid to do anything. They're not bold. They're not aggressive. They're not thinking ahead. And so they just wait to be victimized. So what would you do? Would you throw that bag over the cliff? I think I know the answer. Of course you would. Of course you would. Only a fool would ask for more problems and complications in life if he could possibly avoid it. And that's what we're doing right now. We're knocking on your door saying, hey, you can avoid these things, will you? So this is where we move to the next level of awareness and personal power. And it's really an ascension in wisdom, strategy, and spirit. It's not just a bag of tricks. It's just not legal maneuvers. It's the whole package. I think you're well aware that we're really fighting a spiritual battle here, aren't we? It's not just a few bad cops or a few bad judges here and there. We're dealing with an overwhelming power of spirit from the dark side. And so we need the complete package to deal with this, right? So that's what we're talking about. The new you really requires a transformation, an expansion of your thought processes to go beyond what you know or what you think you know or what you thought you knew to be true, to be humble and aware and meek enough to accept the fact that many of the things that we believe to be true perhaps are not true. And to take our ego out of that and to be open to learning the real truth and how to apply that in our lives for the benefit of ourselves and our family. To be able to advance, to get off that corporate treadmill, we've got to do something different, right? So we want a practical plan with nuts and bolts also, which you can put together. So we're not dealing strictly in the esoteric, on the spiritual level, philosophy, think and grow rich type of thing, all of which has tremendous value. But we're also talking about combining that with a practical plan with nuts and bolts that you can put together, all right? That you can see the pieces, you can make it happen, you can take control of the situation and put the infrastructure together to use as a base for your ascension in other areas. Because now you have the peace and tranquility and security to be able to do that, right? So imagine just for a minute having the peace of mind, knowing that all of your current and future financial needs were taken care of, knowing that you had a level of immunity and couldn't be harassed, sued, attacked in court, could be virtually debt-free, and we're putting good chunks of money aside into investments every month that were growing much faster than you'd ever anticipated. Okay, imagine what that might be like for you. Where would that put you in your life? How would you feel? How would that affect your family? Okay? We're not dreaming here. We're creating our own reality, and we have to know where we're headed in order to create that reality. What is that reality? So if you can imagine the reality for you, we're going to talk about that in the future and put together a step-by-step process for achieving that reality. But you've got to be able to imagine it for a minute beyond the current restrictions that you have in your current circumstances or the traditional thinking that you normally have based on mainstream media and public education, right? Okay, so before we get into the nuts and bolts of some of this, for those of you that may not be real familiar with me, who I am, let me just draw a quick profile for you. I've been an expat for over 20 years. I've been in international business my entire career, ever since high school, literally. My dad put me into a business selling machine parts to Australia and New Zealand, in the railroad business, supply. So done a lot of things in business, banking, and finance. Lived abroad. I've lived on 3 continents. And here are just a few shots, and I don't mean to be a name dropper, but I want to kind of give you the sense that I'm not the type of individual that simply is, sitting at my desk or on my couch collecting links from the internet to try and put some kind of coherent presentation together. I'm a business guy. I'm a sales guy, among many other things. I've got a long list of descriptive titles I could put, but without boring you with that, being a business guy, I recognize the value of creating relationships with people. Business is not done via email. I hate to tell you that. Okay? Nobody does serious business via email. Email can be a useful tool in a serious business, but you're not going to do serious business via email. You need relationships. And so I'm the kind of person that gets off my duff and I go chase around the world looking for people that might be of interest that I might be able to learn something from. So real quick, here in the upper left, if you don't know Peter Schiff, he's a banker and broker, and you'll see him he's a pundit on all the financial shows on cable and YouTube. He's written several books. Peter is the son of Irwin Schiff. You may very well be aware of Irwin, who was, again, a prolific writer and freedom fighter fighting the fraud of the IRS. He essentially died here just in the last year, I think it was, last year or two, died as a prisoner on a prison hospital bed. Tremendous freedom fighter. I knew Peter's dad, Irwin, personally, having spent some time with him. So interesting family. Below that, you see me having lunch with Jim Rogers. Same thing. He's a financial pundit. He's a very smart hedge fund manager. people seek his advice on all the financial shows. You see him all over YouTube, Jim Rogers. And here I am at a conference. I had the good fortune of seeing him having lunch here with a couple empty seats next to him. I sat down, started having a conversation. Very interesting guy. A lot to learn from this guy. So that was nice. And then you see me here below that with Nigel Farage. At the time that I met Nigel, I didn't even know who he was, but I heard him speak after Ron Paul, and I came up to him. I told him, I go, you know, up until now, Nigel, Ron Paul has always been up on a pedestal for me as one of the leading libertarians in the world. And I told Nigel, but after hearing you speak, I got to tell you, I got to tell Ron Paul to move over and make some room for you. I'm going to put you up on that pedestal too. He got a kick out of that. But anyway, I had a chance to talk to him for a few different times during this conference. And he later went on to spearhead the successful Brexit vote, as you are likely well aware. Okay, in the lower right, you see me with Sheikh Fawaz Khalifa. That's his short name. If you know some of these Arabs, they've got 5 or 6 names in their complete name. And also there's Keith Bulfin, B-U-L-F-I-N. Look him up. He's got an interesting story from Australia. But you might ask, who is Sheikh Khalifa? You may be aware, maybe you're not aware, that the tallest building in the world is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, right? Here's the Burj Khalifa. And with the Sheikh's name and what it is, I'll just let you draw your own conclusions, okay? Above that is raising a trophy championship for our sub-20 team, kids 20 years old and younger, winning a championship, a district championship. And I started a private Christian foundation called PCF, Panama Christian Foundation, working with kids to teach values that will carry them further into a more successful life. And of course, those are business and ethics values as well as Christian values that will stick with them throughout their lives. So we do as much as we can in that area. Above that just shows me captaining a yacht. I'm certified to captain power yachts up to 100 feet, 40 meters, and yachting is a passion of mine. I grew up running boats up and down the Mississippi River, growing up right on the Minnesota-Wisconsin border there. And then, of course, you see next to that, a couple of my long-lost loves of my life. Chacho Marimba, I'm just a fanatic dog lover, and probably to the extreme, more than most people. But anyway, a little glimpse as to who I am. You're probably also aware I've written a couple of books, The One Free Man's War, chronicles many of my Don Quixote type of battles with the system, including my arrest and incarceration. So full disclosure, I am a convicted felon, an ex-con. You know the old story, the old saying that, it's dangerous to be right when your government is wrong. And, in the old days, it used to be that, when someone said, oh, this guy was in prison, you think automatically, oh, wow, he must be a bad dude. And the way things are now, things are completely opposite, isn't it? So if someone tells me they've never been in prison, my automatic response is, well, why not? What's wrong? What are you doing? You're not doing anything. You've never been to prison. You're not doing anything. But anyway, don't worry. I'm not going to try and lead you there for your own personal experience. We're going to try and keep you away. But I must say that it was a good experience for me. You can find out more about my books if you don't know them already on my website, or just look them up on Amazon. So that's a little insight as to who this guy is who's talking. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. All right. Let's start with your plan. Right here, we're going to talk about debt, taxes, privacy, protection, and prosperity. Now, if we can master these 5 elements, we've pretty well got our lick, don't we? If you can master these, about the only thing you need to do is stay healthy. We're not going to talk about health tonight. Would love to, but we don't have the time. So let's dig into it. Debt. All right, debt is the scourge of society. Most people have mortgage debt. We've got videos, you may have seen a couple of them, discussing how mortgage debt, most every mortgage created is fraudulent. The system is fraudulent. It's not just some guy pulled some dirty tricks on the paperwork. No, the whole system is fraudulent. The money system is fraudulent. And so, thank God we've got people who have researched this issue and come up with effective methods for exposing that fraud, bringing it into court, and getting that mortgage dismissed by the court. So back to our Imagine slide just a few slides ago. Imagine not having to make that mortgage payment and living in your house free and clear. Wouldn't that be nice? We can do the same thing with unsecured debt, credit cards, student loans, finance companies, things like that. That can be dealt with. It's a little bit different process, but unsecured debt is basically money created by your signature without full disclosure. All right? You created the credit with your promise to pay. That's credit. All right? When in fact, you were led to believe that someone was actually lending you money or property of theirs for your benefit. No. All they did was take the credit that you created, gave it back to you, and made you responsible for all kinds of fees, interest, and in the case of mortgages, security, collateral, things like that. Pure fraud. Okay, so we can get rid of those two things. Secured lines of credit, if you're running on that on a business, that's a different matter. And that can probably get taken care of in the traditional sense when we can eliminate the mortgage and the unsecured debt. Now you've got money freed up to pay off that secured line of credit and free up that collateral that you put up there. Okay, so now we've looked at those three issues. And taxes, that's a whole nother discussion. So let's talk about taxes for a minute. We can talk about income taxes. Not going to get into a whole lot on that right now. Let's just say that income taxes can be dealt with very effectively so that you can position yourself and your activity in such a way that you are no longer a taxpayer, meaning you have no income, meaning there are no income taxes due, and you're not liable for any. So it's not a matter of not paying taxes. No, I don't say don't pay your taxes. I'm saying you can position yourself so that you incur no liability. Say bye-bye IRS, okay? I'm dead serious. Property taxes, interesting subject matter. This is something we're hot on the trail right now, and we're starting to see some cracks in the armor whereby people have been successfully reclassifying the property that they own or that they think they own, that they're renting really, reclassify that in the county records so that no more property taxes are due, okay? That's something we're still refining, but we're seeing some successful cases and working very diligently on being able to duplicate those as far as processes. So that's something that holds some great promise. Capital gains taxes. Now this is an interesting one. The new tax bill that was just passed, that is being trumpeted throughout Washington, D.C., has eliminated the 1031 exchange, whereby you could exchange one piece of property for another piece of property and completely avoid capital gains taxes. Well, with the new tax bill, that 1031 exchange exemption from taxes has been eliminated. And that applies also to cryptocurrencies. All right, so if you're a U.S. person currently filing taxes, which we don't recommend that you be that, that's a whole nother discussion. But if you are, there are some very interesting things that can be done to, if not eliminate capital gains, defer them for perhaps 20 to 30 years. And who knows if the earth will even exist at that point, the way things are going, right? All right, so there's things we can do with capital gains, which is very interesting, okay? Inheritance and estate taxes, all right? Many of us are at an age where, you know, if our parents haven't already passed, they're nearing the end of their timeline, and that's always a concern. It's not really the taxes that are the biggest concern, it's the whole probate racket. If your parents have any kind of an estate, or if you have any kind of an estate you're looking to leave your children, what do I say? Probate is the biggest racket run by the attorneys, and they will milk that probate case until there's virtually nothing left. That's what they do. It'll languish for years and years and years, and the attorneys involved will keep deriving their fees out of that, having to liquidate assets to pay their fees. It's just a racket. You do not want to get caught up in probate, inheritance, and estate taxes. The very simple thing to do there, we talked about trusts earlier. The taxes aren't on the property. The taxes are on the transfer of property. So if you can set things up in such a way that there is no transfer of property, but perhaps a reappointment of someone in charge of that property, you eliminate the transfer, you eliminate inheritance and estate taxes completely. Doesn't go into probate, doesn't get decimated by the probate courts and the corrupt attorneys, okay? So these are things we need to think about. And again, I'm just laying out the roadmap for you. We're hitting on the key elements that we're going to need to deal with in order to get you back on that imagine slide where you're living the life you want to live. Now, as it relates to privacy, you know all about databases. You're on every database there is. I mean, if you've got a job and you're a taxpayer and you're on the county rolls for property taxes and you got your discount card at the supermarket and the health club and you've got, you know, magazine subscription, you're on every database there is. And now they all share with each other, or sell their lists. Or if they have a privacy policy that they don't share or sell their lists, guess what? A hacker is getting in there, and the hackers are getting it. Banks, government agencies, Veterans Administration. I don't need to tell you about that. Hopefully you're current on current events. You see what's going on out there. You got to get out of these databases, okay? There's ways to do that so that you basically just disappear in plain sight, okay? Internet and technology, that's a whole nother genre of a discussion. Banking and finance, that's one that we need to take a really strong look at. And the banks these days are predators. The banks are not there to be your friend. They're not there to help you. They are there to help their shareholders. And above that, they are in bed with the regulators. So being that they are in bed with the regulators, who do they serve? The regulators or the customers? I think that one's obvious. Banks are not your friends anymore, all right? We're talking about bail-ins, fees, the liquidity ratio, the reserve ratios of these banks. They're on the precipice again. And we're going to see in a very short order a domino effect of failing banks where you won't be able to get your money out. So we're talking about alternative banking. We're talking about alternative assets, getting out of the US dollar into alternative assets that will actually hold their value at the very minimum, if not increase rapidly. And we're talking, obviously, precious metals, cryptocurrencies, related types of technologies, things like that. Okay, we've got very strong alternatives in that arena to provide alternatives to the banks, the brokers, and the traditional money hawks, money changers that have always been around as parasites to our wealth and futures. Okay, ownership registrations. Talking about, again, your property, your vehicle. How do you have that registered? Just a quick anecdote on registrations. One of my fellow law club members was telling me a story about how he had a trust that he named Cooperative International Association, something like that. The initials were CIA. And that's how he registered his vehicle, CIA. So when the cop pulled him over let me see your driver's license, proof of insurance and registration. He hands him the registration. The cop looks at it. Ah, CIA, huh? Okay, well, that's all for now. Have a nice day. Oh, and by the way, slow down when you're in the area next time around. You can have all kinds of fun with that, but you've got to get things out of your name. All right. I'll just leave it at that. And there's ways of doing that. We've got members doing that. I've done it. It's not difficult. It just takes some diligence and restructuring your assets, your life, how you do business. Okay, these are the things that we're talking about. So, as far as protection goes, we can talk about protection of physical assets, your property, your vehicles, your equipment, precious metal holdings, anything physical, right? That ties into registration, ownership, storage, things like that. We can talk about liquid assets, cash mainly, cash, securities, financial instruments that are easily convertible, like, bonds, stocks, notes, those type of things. Liquid assets need protection. You don't want to lose those, okay? You need protection from legal processes. We talked about that already. Develop a certain level of immunity. And we want to certainly be protected when talking about assets from seizures and garnishments, things along those lines. Those are elements that we need to put onto our priority list in our plan of action. When it comes to prosperity, let's talk about the rule of 72. Now, hopefully you know what that is. You're familiar with it, or maybe it's been a while since you've seen that used. You certainly didn't learn that in public education. But the rule of 72 is a great little tool to use, and it's real simple. It tells you, by using the rule of 72, you can tell how long it will take for your money to double. Okay? So if you're getting, let's just say 6% interest a year, you take 72 divided by 6% a year, and what do you have? You have 12. So in 12 years, at 6%, your money would double. Okay? And you can reverse the elements if you want to find out how much interest you need in 12 months to double your money. You just take 72 divided by 12 months, and that will tell you you need to earn 6% a month. Okay? So the interest rate and the time period must always match. If you're talking months or weeks or years, all right, those will always match. So that's real simple. Rule of 72. Keep that in mind when you're calculating what you need for retirement or how much you need to sock away at what interest rate in order to have X amount in X time. Okay? So when talking about prosperity, we need to be looking at how can we use the rule of 72 to find the best places to put what little money we have into a vehicle that gives us passive growth, so that that passive growth can continue to grow and build us a nice little nest egg and help us do some serious wealth building, right? All right, so with that in mind, let's say you had $125, all right? To turn that into $1,000, that would have to double 4 times, right? Am I right? So 125 once, doubling once turns into 250. 250 turns into 500. 500 turns into 1,000. So that's double 3 times, right? Okay, so you can use the rule of 72 to tell you how long it can take for you to take $125, turn it into $1,000. Now, that's just playing with numbers, right? Well, I can show you ways to take 125 and turn it into $1,000 in the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and do it tax-free. Real life situations, not just playing with numbers and formulas. Okay? I like to use the example. What if I could take you down the hall to a Coke machine where you could put in $1, get your Coke, and the Coke machine would give you back $10. What if I could show you a machine that would do that? The question would be, how many dollar bills would you stuff into that Coke machine? So there's places you can do that. I can show you the Coke machines, okay? Now, you might be in a position where you could use some additional cash flow. Or you might like to think about moving into a new business altogether. There are some very professional, turnkey, done for you type of businesses that are available that can help you do just that. Whether you want to do it part-time or full-time, this can help you with your location independence. It can help you obviously perhaps shift into a new mode of activity, or if nothing else, simply to augment and to add on to the current activity that you currently have. All right, and in doing so, that could really accelerate the retirement plan that, if you're in line with statistics, probably you most desperately need. Statistics are pretty grim on folks that are actually prepared for retirement. And I would venture to say that most of us are getting pretty close to what used to be known as retirement age, but we don't have the retirement plan. You know, and the old model of going to work for the factory for 40 years, 45 years, and then retiring with a pension, that model doesn't exist anymore. So you're on your own when it comes to retirement, all right? So remember that one of the first slides we talked about making enough for today and for tomorrow, all right? Again, these are things we need to think about. So there's really three keys to success that I want to impress upon you, in my mind anyway. Number one, start thinking out of the box. The old traditional way of doing things isn't cutting it, all right? You know, it's the old definition of insanity. You know what it is, okay? You've got to do something different. You need new solutions for a new age. The world is shifting paradigms very quickly. We're shifting. In fact, we are watching, at this very historical moment in time, we are watching the walls of Jericho crumble around us. The model for the old system is simply falling apart. You can see that. And it's not necessarily going to be a smooth transition, okay? But there are always opportunities in those transitions. And if you're progressive, one or two steps ahead, thinking out of the box, you can get out from underneath those falling granite blocks and avoid being crushed as the old system crumbles. Get out of the way, get on the path, follow your vision, and be proactive in creating your own success. All right, but you got to do that. All right, you got to do things new. Get out of the old and into the new. Be bold and take action with courage and strength. Now that's easy to say, but most of us, if we've gone through the public school system, we're not taught or trained to be bold. To be bold, you need to think for yourself. You need to do things when everybody is telling you you're crazy, you're going to jail. Being bold takes a certain level of faith, and this is where the spirituality comes in. You've got to have faith that God is there for us, that we take the first step out of the boat onto the water, and that He will sustain us. Okay? That's where the spirituality comes in. So most of us have been brought up to be followers, to be meek, to not rock the boat, and we've got to get out of that mode. Because if you don't take care of yourself, no one's going to come along and save you. You've got to do it yourself. And that's where you've got to start thinking about taking bold action, doing things that maybe you wouldn't normally do. And everyone else is screaming at you, telling you you're crazy. All right? But you believe in yourself, you believe in what you're doing, and you've got people around you supporting you, encouraging you, and you know from their successes that you're on the right path. And that's where associating with those of a like mind is so important, that we can learn from those people who we've associated with, perhaps a new circle that we've placed ourselves in, people who have been there and done that. That gives us the courage and the encouragement to take those bold strokes. Okay? When your family, your neighbors, the people you know around town, are just thinking you're crazy. Okay? And I think you can probably relate to what I'm talking about from your own experience. All right? So if you don't do that, here you are, the before picture. Do nothing and you're waiting for that knock on the door. You're waiting for getting that notice in the mail from the IRS. You're waiting for that lawsuit, wondering what the fees, the forms, the fines are coming next. You're wondering how long can you continue your business, paying everyone else first? Who are you really working for? All right? And how will you be thinking about the security of your family's future the way things are going in the world if you don't do something different? Waiting for the chaos and the collapse, which I think we all know is coming, and knowing you are ill-prepared to provide an escape route for your family, imagine what that will feel like. We need to imagine the other side of the coin to know why we're doing this, So what is the price of doing nothing? The price of doing nothing could be everything. Doing nothing could cost you everything. Okay? Think about that. The after picture, you become master of your own domain. God created us, put us on this earth, gave us dominion over the earth. And that is our true call. The earth is our oyster. We have the freedom of mobility. We can go where we like. We've got diversification of assets, interests, businesses, playgrounds, landing pads, escape routes, if the need ever arises. Hopefully it won't. But just knowing it is there, if the shit hits the fan in your local area and you've got 48 hours notice to bug out, where do you go? What do you do? Just knowing you've planned for that in advance. All you need to do is hop on a plane and skedaddle. Isn't that the best insurance policy you could have? Okay, so let's get back to my promises that I made to you earlier. I promised to put you on the path to personal breakthrough, to solve or prevent numerous legal financial issues, create the path to freedom and abundance, and I've given you point for point all of the elements necessary to really accomplish that, and the path to accomplish this. Okay, now the how-to is another matter altogether. Surely, you didn't expect us to solve all these problems in a 1-hour webinar, right? So the how-to is another matter, all right? But we've identified the elements that you need to be incorporating into your plan, and naturally, these elements that have been brought forth for discussion are all elements that we could possibly help you with. So how are we going to do this, all right? We've got a couple of simple items we're going to ask of you to prepare for a one-on-one consultation. All right, if you decide that you want to continue on this path, we'll have a one-on-one consultation, and each individual's needs are unique, of course. Everyone's got their own story, their own circumstances. So our initial consultation will enable us to know more about you, your situation, your circumstances, and this will guide us in making an appropriate recommendation for a customized strategic plan based on your goals and your situation, okay? This strategic plan will include focusing on your priorities and putting the building blocks in place one by one, all right? We're talking about a structured 8 to 10 week boot camp to bring you to the next level of operational privacy and prosperity, covering these elements that we've been discussing naturally. During that boot camp, you'll have a weekly one-on-one private consultation to provide clarity on the subject matter that's presented to you and guidance to keep you moving forward. So this is kind of a done with you program. All right, you've got a coach there to guide you through the whole process, and you're not going to simply be dumped on the curb with a bunch of books and say, here, have at it, okay? You'll have access to private workspace, which is similar to a forum, but it's much more functional, where you can network and share knowledge and experiences with other advanced business members. You'll have access to a complete library of video workshops, instructional audios, recorded conference calls, documents, templates, books ready for download, just more than you're ever going to need to get through, but it's all pertinent to what we're talking about in subject matter here, okay? And you'll have direct access to our third-party service providers, each of whom are specialists in their chosen field. You'll get preferred treatment and some powerful hands-on guidance. If you wish to explore this, you'll be asked to schedule a one-on-one breakthrough consulting session. I'll tell you in just a second how we do that. Okay, we have a procedure, but before you start thinking about that, wait just a minute, because this is not for everyone. I remind you of the first slide at the beginning of the presentation as to who this was for. The solutions that we have in mind are for really serious individuals who, honestly, they've got a net worth and some cash flow to protect, to work with, okay? Because the solutions aren't going to do any good for people that aren't at that point yet. We have other solutions, all right? So maybe to help guide you a little bit, let's take just a minute and go over a worksheet that hopefully you've received in email by now. If not, you'll get it. Look, keep your eyes open for the emails we send you. A lot of people don't open them and they wonder, well, hey, I didn't get that. Well, it's because you didn't open our email. Keep your eyes peeled, okay? So you should have this worksheet, or we'll be getting it soon. Let me go over it real quickly, all right? We've listed some of the key items here in terms of values. And on the right-hand side, you see a column for hard cost, and you see a column for bribe value, okay? Let's go through this. I'll kind of explain the idea. It's real simple, okay? The first item, no traffic tickets, fees, fines, and insurance hikes. What would be the hard cost? Let's say in the next 2 or 3 years, look back the last 2 or 3 years, how much has that cost you, if anything, okay? Have you had any tickets? What did that cost you? Fees, fines, time going to court if you fought the ticket. Did that cause you insurance hikes? Figure out what was that cost? What did that cost you? Okay, maybe you're a good driver and it didn't cost you anything. Okay, put 0 in there, but whatever it is, enter that. Now, let's say that hard cost is, well, I had two traffic tickets and each one was $300. I went to court, fought, and I lost. Each time took me about 3 or 4 hours all morning to do that twice. So that's, let's say 3 hours each. Let's say that's 6 to 7 hours of my time, in addition to the $600 for the tickets. And yeah, my insurance did go up by so much. Figure out that figure, put that in the hard cost. Now, the bribe value would be if someone came along and says, hey, I can set you up where you don't have to pay that. But, I got a wife and kids at home, and I could use, a little help for taking care of that for you. How much would you pay somebody to eliminate that obligation? What would it be worth to you? Okay, let's say that hard cost is $1,000. Okay, what would you pay someone just to make that go away? Right? My grandfather ran a pharmacy in Chicago, and he started the pharmacy and was in his prime during the Al Capone days. And whenever anybody had a traffic ticket or an issue with the city, my grandfather could take care of it. He knew who to go to and get things taken care of. You know, so if you had someone like my grandfather, how much would you pay him just to say, hey, get rid of this for me? That's the bribe value, okay? No IRS, all right? How many years do you have until you want to retire if you think you can retire, okay? I know that's probably a little bit cloudy for some people, but put a figure in there. How many years to retirement times the average annual taxes, income taxes that you pay over the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years, including compliance costs, tax preparation, accounting, CPA, stuff like that. What's the total value there? And then enter the hard cost as well as the bribe value, okay? And you go down the list. Home equity, you've got mortgage payments due. What's your monthly payment times the number of payments due? Business equity figures. Go down, figure out what the figures are for these various items, and come up with a grand total. And we're going to talk about this in our consultation, okay? This will be important. So just so you know how that works, if you haven't seen it yet, look for it in your email. You'll be getting it very shortly in the next day or two, okay? Next, I want to have you ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I going through these exercises? Why am I striving to change the status quo in my life? All right, maybe you've got more than one reason. Write those down. Okay, hopefully you're writing down your goals, you're starting a notebook, maybe even a diary. What will success look like to you? You know, back to our imagine slide. What does that look like? When you imagine your life being the ideal life that you want for yourself, what does that look like for you? Okay, what does it do for you? How does it change your relationships? How does it change how you spend your time? How does that change how you look at yourself and your family? How will success and the increased capability that comes with that, how does that make you feel? What are the emotions that are attached to that peace, tranquility, and security that you feel? Okay? These are important to really think about, dig deep, and write it out. Write it out in a short story form for yourself, because these are the things that will keep you going when things get tough. And we know they do get tough at one point or another. And then the last question is, are you really prepared to do what success requires? You know, or are you just a dreamer? Okay? You're just going to dream about these things and think, well, maybe someday. Or are you going to be proactive and actually do something about it and do what it takes? Because it takes work. You have to invest. You have to invest your time, your energy, blood, sweat, and tears, money. It takes an investment to get to the point of success that we're talking about. It doesn't happen by accident. So here's your homework. Complete your worksheet that I just went over. Get those figures in place. We have an online questionnaire. You'll be getting a link to that also in an email. So watch for that. There's an online questionnaire that will help us to help you start thinking about some things, and it'll help us to guide us through our consultation. All right. Once we get the questionnaire filled out and is complete, then we'll send you a private email with a link to schedule your consultation. Okay. So with that, I promised you a bonus. I'm going to give you 2 here right now. We talked about thinking out of the box, how everything that we have been taught is basically a lie. Here's a link to a research document you'll find very interesting and perhaps useful, which will give you a rabbit trail to follow on some very important items that we've always been taught in life, but we're finding out are not necessarily exactly correct. Okay? Write this link down. This is on my One Freeman's War website, real simple, onefreemanswar.com/bonus.html. It's important you have the HTML in there or you won't get the page. Okay? For those of you that are on the phone, again, it's onefreemanswar.com/bonus.html. And then I have another presentation called Escape the Matrix. It's a video workshop. It's really the sister presentation to this presentation. Escape the Matrix is geared on a personal level. All right, whereas this presentation is geared on a business level. And you'll see, many of the slides are using the same backgrounds and similar graphics. And so it's the sister presentation to this one on a personal level. You can find that at bit.ly/escape matrix, all one word. So for those of you on the phone, bit.ly/escape matrix, one word. Okay, so there's that. That's your bonus. Thank you for sticking with me and going through this and taking your time. At this point, I will get out of screen sharing mode. Okay. Okay, here's one from Ron. Ron asks, I have a business. The IRS is hounding me. How do I protect my assets? All right, well, there's two elements there, Ron. Number one is we can look at what can we do to put a stop to the IRS's processes. Chances are what they're doing is outside of the scope of lawful authority that they have, and there's a good chance we can put a stop to whatever it is they're doing. On the other hand is, what do you do to protect your assets if they proceed and we just don't even consider the first element, all right? We have to be very careful about fraudulent conveyance. And bear in mind, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a tax advisor, I'm not an investment advisor, all right? I don't have any of the so-called professional credentials, which is why typically I can run circles around many of them in their own arena. My education comes from a different venue, a different source, all right? So fraudulent conveyance is the willful intent to defraud creditors. So if you are moving or protecting assets in any way, when you know you have a legal obligation and the intent is to avoid that legal obligation, that's fraudulent conveyance, all right? And no matter what you do, that transfer could be disregarded and reverted back to help settle whatever obligations might be alleged by the other parties, all right? So, number one, what can we do to stop the IRS in their tracks? Number two, whatever we do, and there are a number of options in protecting assets, it has to be done before there's a known obligation, okay? Those are things that come up in the consulting that we'll have to evaluate at the time, given the circumstances that you're dealing with, okay? So here's William. If I have a retirement account, how do I get more control over it? All right, there are various types of retirement accounts, and so we would need to evaluate exactly what you're dealing with there. But in many cases, the typical custodian involved, let's say in an IRA, is very limited in what he would allow you to do or to invest in. And in such a case, it's not a problem at all to fire that custodian, appoint a new custodian who's much more liberal in terms of what he would allow you to do. And the law basically allows you to invest your retirement funds in just about anything that's not illegal, right? So there are a lot of opportunities out there. If you're not happy with the results you're getting in your retirement account, there are things that can be done where we can fire that, because you can fire your custodian, appoint a new custodian who is much more amenable to your desires, and you could actually create your IRA into a self-directed IRA, or other options where you can have more control and get better results out of that retirement account. Okay, so let's see here. Here's Susanna. Susanna says, my investment account is with a broker. Can I do something so it's more private? Well, yes, you can, Susanna. There is good news. The first thing is to evaluate what other opportunities you might have, all right, that are not within the realm or the scope of what your broker can do for you or is willing to do for you, all right? And you'd have to look at if the funds you have now were placed with the other opportunities, where would you be in 2, 5, 10 years down the road versus the path that you're on right now with the returns, the gains, and the growth that you have, all right? So that would help you to determine whether liquidation would be an option. Would you liquidate all or a part of that account, that investment account? Diversification is always good. You might want to consider liquidating a part of it, if not all of it. And that could very well bring tax ramifications, capital gains. We have ways of dealing with large capital gains, all right, to completely defer those capital gains taxes on the liquidation of assets for up to 30 years. All right, that's pretty good. That's really good. With the new tax bill that Trump has signed into law, capital gains are now a larger issue than they have been in the past. 1031 exchanges of property for property, which were previously exempt, are now taxable. And there's a lot of talk about that in the cryptocurrency world, where a lot of cryptocurrency traders are now having to, by virtue of that law, track every transaction they make and determine the capital gain or loss, which is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, that's going to make a lot of people criminals, all right? So you'd have to look at the tax ramifications and weigh those against the possible gains. Can your gains in the new private realm of opportunity offset the tax ramifications that you might have by liquidating, all right? And again, to reiterate the point, if we're looking at perhaps the sale of a property or a large fund, a large amount of securities, and if you're looking at a serious capital gain there are ways that we can totally nullify that capital gain tax for up to 30 years. Okay, so we can talk about that on a more private basis. So yeah, Susanna, there are options. Let's see here. Rolf is asking, my house is tied to my business line of credit, and how can I protect it? Well, Rolf, your house is tied to your business line of credit. How can you protect your house? All right. What we want to do probably is eliminate that line of credit. How can we do that if you don't have the cash to do it right now? All right. One way to get creative on that might be to work on discharging the mortgage. Do you have a mortgage on that property? Chances are, if you have a mortgage from a national bank or national mortgage company, it's rife with fraud. We can evaluate that fraud, get the courts to discharge that mortgage, and live in the house free and clear, all right, without the mortgage payments. Now you can apply those mortgage payments you were paying before. Now you can apply that to pay off your line of credit, and now your home is free and clear. Now that it's free and clear, you can move that home into a trust, all right, or do other things with it. So Rolf, good news. There are solutions for you, all right? Okay, let's see here. Alan says, can I put my home into a trust now? Well, if the home is free and clear, if you've got a mortgage on the home, chances are you've got a due on sale clause, which would also include transfer, that you'd have to get approval or permission before you transferred the property. And moving it into a trust typically would not be allowed, simply because that could infringe upon the rights of the mortgagor. All right. So again, if you've got a mortgage on the property, let's discharge the mortgage. Let the courts do that if we can find fraud. And once your home is free and clear, then it can be put into trust and be completely protected. Okay? So, good questions. I'm going to leave it at that. There's a lot more that we have to discuss, but I don't want to take too much more of your time. So with that, I will bid you adieu and fill out the questionnaire. I'll look forward to seeing you in the near future. This is Mark signing off. Take care and God bless.